I want you to close your eyes for a second, assuming you aren't driving or operating heavy machinery, of course.
Yeah, please keep your eyes on the road if you are.
Right, definitely do that. But if you can, I want you to picture
Sure.
a very specific scene. You are standing right in the middle of a sprawling, ancient, intricate city, and it's just before dawn. The sky is that heavy, bruised purple color.
Oh, I love that time of day.
It's the best.
Yeah.
And there is this soft, rhythmic sound of rain falling across centuries-old stone streets. It's totally quiet. It's moody. It honestly feels like the entire world is asleep, just suspended in this perfect, still moment.
Right.
But then as the sky just starts to turn gray, the rain gradually fades. And in its place, piercing right through the quiet, you start to hear a birdsong. The ambient noise shifts. A distant engine hums. A door creaks open. The city is waking up. It's breathing. It is alive.
It's such a vivid image.
It really is. And the reason I want you to picture this is because just like that city, the relationships in your life, your friendships, your family dynamics, your partnerships, they are living, breathing topographies. So today we are taking a deep dive into a framework that maps human connection directly onto the mechanics of urban planning.
Which is a stunning visual to start with because it immediately forces this major shift in perspective. When we think of urban planning, we think of massive, complex, interdependent systems. And that is exactly how the philosophical dialogue we're unpacking today asks us to view our emotional lives. The text is called Relational Topology Part 4, The Living City. And it features 3 distinct voices. So we have a figure known as Doc C, a mentor, and someone named Christian. Together, they construct this incredibly layered methodology for understanding how our human connections actually function.
And it isn't just theory either. We're going to explore how these connections grow, how they inevitably change, how they fracture, and probably most importantly, how they heal.
Yeah, the healing part is crucial.
Because if you have ever struggled with a friendship that seems to be, I don't know, mysteriously fading, or a family dynamic that is shifting underneath your feet and making you feel totally off balance, or even a connection that feels fundamentally broken, you need a blueprint. You need to know how to navigate the streets of your own emotional life.
Exactly.
But before we can get into the practical side of fixing bridges or paving new roads in this metaphorical city, we have to dismantle a massive, almost universal misunderstanding about how human bonds are supposedly designed to work.
We really do. We have to talk about the illusion of permanence. This is the foundational hurdle that Doc C addresses right at the beginning of the dialogue. He argues that our absolute greatest misconception about relationships is this deeply held belief that they should remain exactly as they began.
Which is wild when you really interrogate it.
It is. We possess this subconscious expectation that the baseline of a connection is static.
Right, like we all know conceptually that people change.
Yeah.
We know that we change. But somehow we expect the dynamic between two changing people to remain perfectly frozen in amber.
Yes, frozen in amber, that's exactly it.
Like we expect our best friend from college to relate to us exactly the same way 10 years later.
Yeah.
Even though, one of you is navigating corporate burnout and the other is raising 3 toddlers.
Yeah.
We carry this strange resentment when the vibe shifts.
And we need to explore why that resentment exists, because it isn't born out of malice. Psychologically speaking, we crave stability in a world that is inherently chaotic and unpredictable.
Oh, absolutely. The world is exhausting.
Right, so we use our close relationships as anchors. When your career is up in the air, or your health is fluctuating, or the economy is just unstable, you want to look at your partner, your sibling, or your oldest friend and say, you are my fixed point. You are the one variable in my life that does not change.
Yeah.
It is a survival mechanism to seek out that kind of emotional bedrock. But the framework points out a harsh, undeniable reality, which is that nothing living remains unchanged.
Right. You don't look at a forest and get angry that the trees are taller than they were 5 years ago.
Exactly. You don't look at a river and expect the water to hold perfectly still. Living systems are defined by movement, adaptation, and transformation. Forests grow, rivers carve new paths through rock, people age and evolve, and cities, to anchor back to our core metaphor, cities expand. Growth always, inevitably, rearranges the architecture.
I am so glad you brought that specific phrasing. Growth always rearranges the architecture. When I read that, it made me realize how often we treat our relationships not like living cities, but like historical museums.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Think about how a museum operates. You
Yeah.
walk in, the lighting is perfectly temperature controlled to prevent degradation. Everything of value is placed securely behind velvet ropes, and the absolute non-negotiable rule of the building is do not touch anything.
Right, preserve it at all costs.
Exactly. And we try to curate our relationships exactly like this. We identify the peak moment of the relationship, maybe the honeymoon phase of a marriage, or that one summer you and your best friend were inseparable, and we try to put that exact dynamic behind glass.
That is a phenomenal way to frame it. The museum curation approach to love.
Yeah.
But what happens to a relationship when you put it behind a velvet rope?
It becomes completely inaccessible. You can look at it, you can remember how great it was, but you can't actually live in it. You can't use it.
Precisely. It doesn't grow, it just gathers dust. The mentor in the text completely rejects the museum model. He states that a city is continually becoming. Think about what makes a city vibrant. Roads are constantly being expanded to handle new traffic. Old weathered buildings are retrofitted.
Yeah, they're updated for modern use.
Right. New families arrive with different cultures while old residents depart. A city is a metropolis of movement and friction. If an actual city stops expanding, repairing, and changing its skyline, it doesn't stay perfectly preserved in a state of glory. It stagnates. The economy dies, the infrastructure crumbles, and the population leaves.
Which brings up a massive paradox in how we evaluate our own lives. Because if change isn't a sign of failure, if rearranging the architecture is just the natural byproduct of two people growing, then how do we define failure?
That's the big question.
I think a lot of people listening right now are probably thinking, okay, but I've had relationships that definitely failed. It wasn't just a healthy architectural shift, it was a collapse. So how does this framework distinguish between healthy change and actual failure?
Well, Doc C provides a very precise and honestly very confronting definition for this. He tells Christian that change is evidence of life. Failure, he argues, is the refusal to adapt.
The refusal to adapt, let's sit with that for a second. It shifts the entire burden of success, doesn't it?
It completely flips the script. Under the traditional museum curator model, success is measured by your ability to keep things exactly as they were on day one. But under Doc C's framework, success is measured by your willingness to let the relationship evolve.
Wow.
Yeah, failure isn't when the relationship changes. Failure is when you look at a growing, sprawling city and demand that it continue to operate like a tiny, rural village simply because the village is what you were comfortable with.
That's such a trap we fall into.
It really is. Failure is demanding that your partner, who has just gone through a massive personal transformation, interact with you using the exact same emotional vocabulary they used 5 years ago.
That is heavy, but it's also incredibly liberating. Because if we accept this premise that relationships are living cities and that refusing to adapt is the only true failure, then we can stop feeling guilty about the fact that our connections look different today than they did yesterday.
Exactly. The guilt just vanishes.
So if change is the baseline, what are the actual structural forces driving that change? What is forcing the architecture to rearrange? The text breaks this down into two main forces, right? The external shifts of time, which it calls seasons, and the internal shifts of the people involved, which it calls maturing roles.
Let's look at the external force first. The first principle outlined in the text is that seasons are structural. Doxy explains that every relationship exists within a specific season, and these seasons function almost like specific assignments in our lives.
This was one of the most clarifying concepts in the entire deep dive for me. Doxy lists out these potential assignments, and as I read them, I could instantly map them onto people from my past and present.
Oh, absolutely. It's so recognizable.
He says some relationships are assigned to introduce us to a new version of ourselves or new world. Some are assigned to train us. Some are there to encourage us, some to challenge us, some to accompany us for the long haul, and some, and this is a tough one, are specifically assigned to prepare us to continue alone.
It's a brilliant taxonomy of human connection. But to really grasp its utility, we need to contrast it with how society typically values relationships. Culturally, we have an absolute obsession with the concept of forever.
Oh, big time.
We write songs about forever, we make vows about forever, our fairy tales end with happily ever after. We have subconsciously created a hierarchy where longevity is the sole metric of value. We tend to view a relationship that lasts 50 years as inherently more successful, more profound, and more valid than a relationship that lasts 5 months.
Oh, completely. If a romantic relationship ends after a year, what's the first thing people say? Well, that was a waste of time.
Right, a waste.
Or if a friendship burns incredibly bright in your 20s but fades out by 30, we view it as a failed friendship.
Yeah.
We treat the end date as a retroactive cancellation of the relationship's value.
And that is exactly what Doc C is vehemently pushing back against. If we view relationships through the lens of structural assignments, we realize that no season is inherently superior to another. Longevity is just one type of assignment, the accompany assignment. But let's look at the train assignment. Let's say you have a relationship, maybe a mentor or a demanding boss, or even a romantic partner who is incredibly difficult but forced you to establish boundaries.
Oh, we've all had one of those.
Right. You might only be in that person's life for an intense, highly volatile 6-month period. Under the cultural model, that's a failure. Under Doc C's model, that person was structurally assigned to train you. They built psychological resilience or neuroplasticity in you that you will use for the rest of your life.
It's so true.
They contributed something just as necessary to your life's architecture as the person who accompanies you for a decade.
I want to spend some time on that because redefining these seasons changes everything.
Yeah.
Let's take the challenge assignment. Have you ever had a friend who you just constantly debated with? Someone who forced you to defend your worldview? Who maybe irritated you because they never just agreed with you?
Definitely. It's exhausting but stimulating.
Exactly. Often, those friendships don't last forever because the friction eventually exhausts both parties. But if you look back, you realize that person sharpened your intellect more than anyone else. They were the scaffolding you needed to build your own belief system. Once the building is sturdy, the scaffolding is removed. The scaffolding didn't fail, it completed its structural assignment.
That is a perfect analogy, and the text provides an incredibly comforting way to frame the transitions between these seasons. The mentor says, winter isn't the enemy of spring, it prepares it.
Winter isn't the enemy of spring. I want everyone listening to think about a relationship in their life right now that feels like it's in winter. Maybe it's a sibling you used to talk to every day, and now, because of career demands or geographic distance, you only catch up on holidays.
Yeah, just those quick holiday texts.
Right. The communication is sparse, the warmth feels a bit distant, the landscape of the relationship is bare. The immediate human reaction to that is panic. We internalize it as a loss of love. We think they don't care about me anymore, or I've done something wrong to push them away.
Which causes us to act out of anxiety. We might try to force a springtime dynamic, like demanding more of their time, forcing deep conversations, which honestly only causes more friction.
Yeah, it pushes them further away.
Exactly. But if we apply the mentor's wisdom, we look at the natural world. What actually happens in winter? The trees lose their leaves, yes, the surface looks dead. But beneath the frost line, root systems are deepening. The soil is resting and regenerating nutrients. Winter is not a mistake of nature. It is a vital structural requirement for the explosive growth that happens in spring.
So if you are experiencing a quiet season with someone you love, it might not be a failure of affection. It might just be the structural winter necessary for whatever assignment is coming next. It removes the panic. It allows you to say, okay, the assignment right now is quietness. The assignment is distance. I don't need to fix this because it isn't broken.
It allows you to respect the season, but time and seasons are only the external forces. The text also introduces a second principle, which deals with the internal architecture of the city. The principle is roles mature.
Right, because the people themselves are changing.
Exactly. Because it's not just the external environment changing, the individuals living inside the city are constantly evolving, acquiring new skills, and aging into new responsibilities. Christian asks a very simple yet profound question in the dialogue. He says, can people occupy different places at different times?
And Doc C answers with an absolute, unequivocal yes. He lists out these specific internal evolutions that happen over the course of a long-term connection. The teacher becomes a colleague, the student becomes the mentor, the employee becomes the leader. And the most universally challenging one, the child becomes the caregiver.
Ah, man. That last one is a massive architectural shift. It fundamentally alters the load-bearing walls of a family dynamic.
It really does. Think about the mechanics of that. For 40 or 50 years, the parent is the structure. They provide the shelter, they make the decisions, they offer the guidance, and then, through the slow erosion of age or a sudden medical crisis, the entire building flips.
Just overnight, sometimes.
Suddenly, the child is the one scheduling the doctor's appointments, managing the finances, and telling the parent what they can and cannot do for their own safety.
It is profoundly destabilizing for both parties. The parent feels a loss of autonomy and dignity, and the child feels the crushing weight of a responsibility they never asked for. But Doc C argues that healthy cities allow people to grow into these new responsibilities, and therefore, healthy relationships must do the same.
But let's be real about what that transition actually feels like,
Yeah.
because it is rarely smooth. I think this is where we have to push back a little on the romanticized idea of growth. When roles change, whether it's a child becoming a caregiver or a junior employee suddenly getting promoted to manage the person who trained them, it causes intense, palpable friction.
Oh, yeah. It's incredibly tense.
It feels awkward. There are arguments, there are hurt feelings, there is resistance. And because we are conditioned to fear conflict, we misinterpret that friction. We think, oh no, our relationship is falling apart. The bond is breaking.
That is a crucial insight. We mistake the sound of construction for the sound of destruction. The friction you are feeling isn't the relationship failing. The fiction is the relationship adapting.
That's such a helpful reframe.
It is. If you are retrofitting a historic building with new plumbing and electrical wiring, there is going to be noise. There is going to be dust. Walls have to be opened up. If you try to force the parent-child dynamic when the reality of the situation requires a caregiver-patient dynamic, you will actually break the connection.
You just tear the whole house down.
Exactly. The adaptation, as messy and loud as it is the survival mechanism. Repairing a connection in that moment doesn't mean fixing a break. It often just means sitting down amidst the dust and mutually acknowledging, hey, we are in new roles now. This is uncomfortable, but it is necessary.
Okay, so we've established that relationships are going to undergo massive seasonal shifts, and the roles within them are going to drastically mature. That is the macro-level view of the city. But how do we manage the day-to-day wear and tear of living in that city?
Right, the daily grind.
Because a city isn't just sweeping seasons and changing skylines. It's the street-level reality. It's the infrastructure. It's the commute. And that brings us to the concept of routine maintenance, which the text refers to as caring for our emotional roads.
This is the third principle. Roads must be maintained. Doc C gives us a very clear, highly practical definition of what constitutes pavement in this metaphor. He says communication is road maintenance.
Communication is road maintenance. It's so beautifully pragmatic. But it also highlights the danger of neglect. If communication is the asphalt, what happens when we stop laying it down? Doc C outlines this cascading series of consequences that I guarantee everyone listening has experienced at least once. It's a chain reaction. First, he says, traffic stops.
Right. The daily flow of sharing your life halts. The minor updates, the random text messages about a funny thing you saw on the street, the casual debrief after a long day, the small interactions cease.
And once the traffic stops, the second phase kicks in. Misunderstandings accumulate. Because you aren't talking on a regular basis, you lose the context of the other person's life.
You're flying blind.
You really are. You don't know that they are completely stressed out about a project at work. So when they give you a short, clicked answer to a question, you assume they are mad at you. You can't clarify anything because the road is closed.
And that leads directly to the third and most dangerous phase. Assumptions replace dialogue.
Let's dive deep into the anatomy of an assumption, because this is where relationships go to die. How does an uncommunicated feeling ferment into a massive false narrative?
It happens because the human brain is a meaning-making machine. If there's a gap in information, your brain will absolutely invent a story to fill it. And because of our negativity bias, that story is almost always a threat assessment.
Oh, always. It's never a positive story.
Never. So let's say a friend cancels plans with you 2 weeks in a row. And because the communication traffic has stopped, they don't give you a clear reason. They just say, they are busy. You don't ask for clarification because you don't want to seem needy. So you have a gap in information.
And the brain jumps right in.
Yep.
Your brain fills it with an assumption. They don't value my time. They're quietly trying to phase me out of their life. They probably never really liked me that much anyway. You have just constructed a massive, structurally unsound bridge of assumptions based on zero actual dialogue.
And what's wild is that the reality could be that their dog is sick, or they're dealing with intense financial anxiety that they are too ashamed to talk about. But because the road wasn't maintained, you are now operating in completely different cities, responding to totally different realities.
It's tragic, really.
It is. This completely reframes the psychology of distance. When two people drift apart, we always narrativize it as this mystical loss of love. We say things like, the spark just died, or we just grew apart, as if it was this uncontrollable weather event. But if we look at it through Doc C's framework, the distance didn't grow because the affection magically vanished. The distance grew simply because the road deteriorated from a lack of upkeep. You didn't stop loving them, you just stopped filling the potholes. And eventually the road became too jarring, too uncomfortable, and too damaging to drive down. It's easier to just stay home. The mentor has a brilliant observation about this exact phenomenon. He says, most bridges don't collapse suddenly. They weaken one unnoticed crack at a time.
One unnoticed crack at a time. I want to spend some real time on this because this is where the theory has to hit the pavement for the listener. What exactly does an unnoticed crack look like in daily life? Because it rarely looks like a dramatic relationship-ending event.
No, the structural collapses caused by massive betrayals are rare. Most relationships die from 1,000 microfractures. An unnoticed crack is usually a sin of omission. Let's invent a highly specific scenario.
Let's hear it.
You are sitting on the couch with your partner after dinner. You are both scrolling on your phones. Your partner reads something, sighs heavily, and shifts their body weight away from you. You notice it. You feel the shift in energy. You have a choice in that exact second. The road maintenance choice is to put your phone down and ask, hey, what was that sigh for? Are you okay?
But the microfracture choice is to pretend you didn't hear it because you are tired, because you don't want to open a can of worms, because you think it's probably nothing, and if it is something, I don't have the energy to deal with it right now. So you keep scrolling.
Exactly. Or it's leaving a slightly passive-aggressive text from a friend unresolved because you tell yourself it's not worth a fight. Or it's brushing off a petty argument about loading the dishwasher without actually clearing the air, letting the resentment simmer just below the surface.
It's saying I'm fine when your partner asks what's wrong, when you absolutely are not fine.
Right. Each one of those moments is a microscopic fissure in the concrete of the relationship.
And one microfracture doesn't collapse a bridge. You can have 100 unresolved sighs and still have a functional relationship. But what happens over a year, 5 years, 10 years, 1,000 tiny unresolved moments of disconnection? Suddenly, the structural integrity of the relationship is deeply compromised. The rebar is exposed to the elements and begins to rust.
And then the storm hits.
Exactly. When a relatively minor storm hits a minor disagreement about finances or holiday plans, the entire bridge collapses, and everyone is shocked. But the structural engineer knows it wasn't the storm that brought it down. It was the years of deferred maintenance.
Which is why the unglamorous, everyday work of urban planning is so vital. It is the only way a city survives.
So here is a highly actionable step for you, the listener, right now. I want you to mentally scan the map of your emotional city. Identify one crumbling emotional road. Just one. Where is there a crack? Where have assumptions replaced dialogue? Is there a friend you haven't spoken to in 2 months because you are assuming they are mad at you? Is there an unresolved tension with your partner from 3 days ago that you are both just pretending didn't happen?
Pick one of those.
Yeah, I want you to pave it today with a simple conversation. It does not have to be a massive, dramatic summit. It can just be a text message. Hey, I feel like we haven't really connected lately, and my brain is making up stories that you're upset with me. Can we catch up? Or turning to your partner on the couch and saying, hey, I know we moved past that argument yesterday, but I still feel a little weird about it. Can we actually talk it through? Do the routine maintenance. Fill the pothole.
That is fantastic advice. However, we have to acknowledge the harsher realities of living in a complex system. Sometimes, despite your absolute best maintenance, despite filling every pothole and having excellent communication, a bridge does break.
It's true.
A massive storm hits. A major betrayal occurs. A fundamental breach of trust shatters the connection. When a relationship is seriously damaged, we move out of the realm of routine maintenance, and we face a critical, defining choice in how to respond.
Which brings us to a major pivot in the framework. The fourth principle, repair, is different from replacement. And this is where Doxy really takes aim at the modern zeitgeist of how we handle interpersonal conflict.
He draws a very sharp, very critical contrast. He states modern culture often prefers replacement. Living systems prefer restoration.
This might be the most countercultural point in the entire text. We have built an entire global society around the concept of disposable throwaway items. If your toaster breaks, you don't take it apart, diagnose the electrical fault, order a replacement filament, and solder it back together.
Nobody does that.
You throw it in the trash and you order a new one online for $20, and it arrives the next day. The effort of repair vastly outweighs the cost of replacement. And Doxy is pointing out that we have deeply internalized this consumer mindset and applied it to human beings.
It is the absolute commodification of human connection. The second a relationship gets hard, or someone offends us, or a connection stops being perfectly convenient, modern culture prescribes a very specific response. Cut them off, protect your peace, cancel them, delete their number, find a new friend who doesn't require this much work, replace the structure.
And look, I am going to push back here because sometimes protecting your peace is incredibly valid and necessary. If a structure is actively toxic or abusive, you absolutely need to leave the building.
Of course, that's a safety issue.
Right. But I think what Doxy is warning against is using protecting your peace as an excuse to avoid the hard work of conflict resolution. We have weaponized therapy speak to justify bailing on relationships the moment they require us to stretch or forgive.
That is exactly the distinction. When a building is on fire, yes, evacuate. But if a building just has a leaky roof, you don't bulldoze the entire property. Doxy points out that the instant replacement mindset goes against the very nature of a living, breathing ecosystem. Look at how actual communities operate in the physical world. Cities pour millions of dollars into preserving historic buildings.
Families go out of their way to preserve inconvenient traditions.
Indigenous cultures preserve oral histories over millennia. Why? Because wiping the slate clean every time there is damage destroys the continuity of the organism. When a historic cathedral catches fire, a healthy city doesn't instantly pave it over to build a modern parking garage. They bring in structural engineers. They carefully, meticulously assess what can be salvaged. They spend decades rethinking it stone by stone.
Because they recognize the intrinsic, irreplaceable value of history. You cannot Amazon Prime a 20-year friendship. You cannot instantly replace the shared context of someone who knew your parents when they were young or someone who remembers who you were before you were successful.
You really can't. Those connections take decades to build.
Right. Doxy says relationships deserve thoughtful repair when repair remains possible. But thoughtful repair requires a tool that is incredibly unpopular right now. It requires forgiveness.
And Doxy provides, hands down, one of the most profound paradigm-shifting definitions of forgiveness I have ever encountered. He says, forgiveness doesn't erase history, it makes future movement possible.
Let's really unpack that because it fundamentally alters how we approach fixing damaged connections. Why is this definition so powerful?
It's powerful. So often, people hold on to anger because they think extending forgiveness is synonymous with saying, what you did to me was okay, or let's just pretend this terrible thing never happened. They view forgiveness as an eraser, and nobody wants their pain erased or invalidated.
Right. We think forgiveness means hitting the reset button back to day one. Like, let's wipe the slate clean.
Exactly. But erasing history is exactly what Doxy is arguing against. A living city cannot erase its history without losing its identity. If a massive hurricane damages a critical bridge, forgiveness isn't standing on the shore, looking at the twisted metal, and pretending the hurricane didn't happen.
The wreckage is still there.
The wreckage is real. The damage is undeniable. Forgiveness, in this framework, is the pragmatic, grueling act of clearing the debris off the road. You aren't doing it to absolve the hurricane, you are doing it so that you can actually travel back and forth again. Forgiveness is not a gift you give the other person to make them feel better. It is a functional, structural necessity for your own future movement.
I love that. You are clearing the debris so you can move. But here's where the metaphor hits a very painful reality, and I have to challenge the application of this. I'm putting myself in the shoes of a listener who has tried this. What happens if you want to restore the historic building? You recognize the value of the history. You are standing there with your hard hat. You are clearing the debris. You are offering this functional forgiveness. You are ready to do the thoughtful repair, but you are the only one doing the work.
Yeah, that happens a lot.
The other person is just sitting on the riverbank watching you sweat. Or worse, they are standing on the other side of the bridge, still throwing bricks at you. You can't fix a connection alone.
You absolutely cannot. And this is exactly the tension Christian identifies in the dialogue. He sees the flaw in trying to unilaterally rebuild. Christian says repair requires two builders, not one.
The two builders rule. This is vital.
And Doxy validates Christian's realization completely. He replies, exactly. You can extend an invitation. You cannot construct another person's willingness.
You cannot construct another person's willingness. That is a massive defining boundary. I want to speak directly to anyone listening who is currently exhausted. If you have been single-handedly trying to rebuild a bridge to a parent or a former best friend or an ex-partner who simply refuses to pick up a tool, I hope you hear that line as a profound comfort and as permission to stop.
Yes, permission to put the tools down.
You are only responsible for extending the invitation for thoughtful restoration. You are responsible for clearing the debris on your side of the river. But you cannot build a bridge from one side of the chasm and expect it to hold weight. The physics do not work. It will collapse under the pressure, and it will take you down with it.
It is a liberating realization, but it is also a deeply grieving one. Because recognizing that you cannot construct their willingness forces you to accept that the bridge might never be rebuilt, which naturally transitions us to the most difficult, heart-wrenching part of this entire framework. What do we do when the other builder never shows up? Or what happens when a structure is simply so thoroughly damaged by betrayal or so thoroughly outgrown by the passage of time that it is genuinely beyond repair?
We have to learn the hardest lesson of urban planning.
We do. And this brings us to the fifth principle. Some structures must be released, knowing when it is wise to stop repairing and start demolishing.
The mentor delivers this truth very plainly, without any sentimentality. He says, every city eventually removes buildings that no longer serve life. Not because history is hated, because new life requires space.
Not because history is hated, because new life requires space. Doc C calls this one of adulthood's absolute hardest lessons. The realization that not every relationship is meant to continue indefinitely.
We circle back again to our cultural obsession with forever. Because we are conditioned to believe that a successful relationship is one that never ends, we logically assume that if a relationship does end, someone must have failed. And if someone failed, someone must be the villain.
Right, there always has to be a bad guy.
We feel that we have to hate the other person, or at least retroactively hate the history we shared, in order to justify the demolition of the building. We do this all the time. We completely rewrite history to justify an ending. We villainize our exes, even if the breakup was mutual and born out of simple incompatibility. We talk trash about friends we naturally drifted away from.
It's a defense mechanism.
It's like we need them to be the bad guy, so we don't feel guilty about letting the building come down. We look at a 5-year relationship that ended and say, the whole thing was a lie. But that is burning the city down just to clear one lot. The text provides a much healthier alternative. Some relationships just complete their structural assignment. Some naturally drift into winter and stay there. Some become memories instead of daily companions. The ending doesn't mean it was a failure, and it doesn't require you to hate the history.
But this raises a massive psychological challenge for anyone struggling to find closure with a past relationship. How do you safely demolish a structure in your mental city without destroying the surrounding neighborhoods with collateral damage? How do you let go of a building you used to love? Doc C gives us the secret to closure in one single, incredibly potent sentence. He says, gratitude allows release without resentment.
I want to really dig into the psychological weight of resentment versus gratitude here. Because carrying resentment for years, it feels like holding on to the deed of a condemned building, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Resentment is a stubborn, ego-driven refusal to let the structure fall, even though it's completely hollowed out, the roof is caved in, and it's dangerous to walk through. You are essentially paying massive emotional taxes on a property that is giving you absolutely nothing in return but anxiety, anger, and stress.
Emotional taxes, I love that.
Psychologically, resentment locks your brain in the past. It forces your nervous system to constantly re-engage with a threat or a betrayal that is no longer actively happening. You are keeping the ghost town alive through sheer force of anger.
So how does gratitude act as the demolition crew? Because, let's be honest, it feels completely counterintuitive, almost insulting, to be told to feel grateful for something that ended, especially if it ended painfully or unfairly.
It feels counterintuitive because we misunderstand what we are supposed to be grateful for. Gratitude in this context does not mean you are thankful for the betrayal. You aren't being grateful for the pain, or the lie, or the painful ending. Gratitude is shifting your cognitive framing away from the collapse and toward the original utility of the building.
Okay, so focusing on what it was built for in the first place.
Exactly. You are being grateful for the assignment that was completed. You are looking at the condemned structure and saying, thank you for housing me during that specific season of my life when I needed shelter. Thank you for teaching me what I needed to learn about my own boundaries. I am grateful for the good years we had. But you no longer serve life. The architecture is no longer sound, so I am safely and intentionally letting you go.
Wow.
By viewing a past relationship as a completed assignment rather than a catastrophic failure, you remove the emotional toxicity, you neutralize the resentment, you can safely demolish the structure, and more importantly, you free up that prime real estate in your mind and your heart.
You make room for new life. You clear the lot. That is such a profound, gentle way to process the end of a relationship. It allows you to grieve the loss without being consumed by bitterness. But it's also incredibly important to note that just because we release a structure or safely demolish a building, it doesn't mean it completely vanishes from our city's map without a trace. Some places and some people leave a permanent, indelible mark on the geography of who we are.
Which brings us to the seventh principle in the text, and arguably the most beautiful concept in the entire framework, legacy districts.
I am absolutely obsessed with this concept. Christian makes this poignant observation in dialogue. He says some places never leave us, and Doxy agrees, adding, neither do some people. He introduces this idea that every living city, no matter how modern or expansive it becomes, contains historic districts. These are places that are protected and preserved not because they are modern or efficient or part of the daily commute, but because they tell the foundational story of how the city became itself.
Think about the urban planning of any major ancient metropolis. Think about London or Rome or even Boston. Right in the middle of all the glass and steel skyscrapers, the high-speed transit hubs, and the modern commerce, you will find these carefully preserved pockets of deep history. A Roman wall in the middle of a London financial district. A centuries-old pub sitting next to a modern high-rise.
Exactly. This is the exact analogy I kept coming back to. It's like walking through the old cobblestone part of a modern city. The streets are narrow, the buildings lean a little bit, the street lamps are old-fashioned. You have relationships in your life that are exactly like those cobblestone streets.
We all have them.
Maybe it's a childhood friend you haven't seen in a decade, but who knew you when you had braces and big dreams? Or a mentor from your very first job who took a chance on you when you had no experience? Or even a past love, someone you dated in your 20s who fundamentally shaped your worldview and taught you how to listen, even though you eventually realized you were incompatible. You don't talk to them daily. They aren't part of your modern routine. You aren't actively building new roads with them. But they are a legacy district. They are part of the bedrock.
And Doc C tells us exactly how to handle these relationships because there is a danger in how we relate to the past. He says these districts remain foundational, not because they continue, because they mattered. And his instruction for how to interact with them is brilliantly simple. Honor them, without trying to live there forever.
Honor them without trying to live there forever. That is the trap of nostalgia, isn't it? We get nostalgic, we get a little lonely in our modern, bustling lives, and we mentally walk into the cobblestone district of our past. We look around at the warm lighting and the familiar streets and we think, oh, it was so beautiful and simple here. I was so happy here. I should move back. I should text my ex. I should try to force that childhood friendship back into a daily occurrence. But you can't.
You can't because you are no longer the person who fits in those buildings. The plumbing doesn't work for the complex needs of your current life. The streets are literally too narrow for the person you've grown into. Nostalgia is a wonderful place to visit, but it is a terrible place to reside permanently.
It really is.
It stunts your growth. You are supposed to honor the foundational people in your life. You can visit the memories. You can send them a Christmas card. You can hold immense gratitude for how they shaped you. But you cannot permanently reside in a past season. You have to commute back to the present.
It is the delicate, sometimes painful balance of honoring history while insisting on progress. And holding that balance is what makes the final mechanism of the city possible. We've talked about external seasons, maturing roles, routine maintenance, repairing damage, demolishing structures, and preserving history. But what happens after all of that? What is the ultimate goal? That brings us to the sixth principle, renewal.
Renewal. Because after a city has weathered the changing seasons, repaired its broken roads, safely released the condemned structures to clear space, and protected its legacy districts, the city has to keep living. It has to look toward the future. Doc C refers to renewal as one of the quiet miracles of life.
A quiet miracle. What does that look like in the context of human connection?
He describes it beautifully. He says, people reconcile, families heal, communities rebuild, trust returns. But he places a massive emphasis on the pacing of this miracle. In a culture that demands instant gratification, we want renewal to happen overnight. We want to have one good conversation, and suddenly the 10-year rift in a family is completely healed.
Right, like magic.
But Doc C reminds us that cities are not built in a day, and they are not renewed in a day. It happens gradually, stone by stone, conversation by conversation, choice by choice.
It's a routine maintenance all over again, but applied to the act of rebuilding. It's laying down one brick of trust, and then waiting to see if it holds weight, and then laying down another. And the mentor adds this perfect, clarifying thought to summarize the process. Cities aren't renewed through demolition alone. They're renewed through faithful stewardship.
That word, stewardship, is the key to the entire framework. Stewardship implies an ongoing, active, long-term care. You don't just fix a relationship once, declare it repaired, and walk away. You steward it. You tend to the roads over time. You monitor the changing seasons. You adjust to the maturing roles. You manage the city.
Okay, let's pull all of this together because we've covered the entire sprawling map of this metaphorical city. We have zoomed in on the potholes and zoomed out to the skyline. In the final reflection of the text, the mentor summarizes the ultimate wisdom of navigating human connection. He says that emotional wisdom is ultimately about learning the distinct difference between four distinct actions: preserving, repairing, releasing, and rebuilding.
It is a complete holistic diagnostic toolkit. If a listener is struggling with a specific relationship right now, they can look at it through this lens and ask themselves the hard questions. Does this connection simply need to be preserved as a legacy district, honored for what it was but left in the past? Does this connection need active, thoughtful repair because the road is cracked from lack of communication? Must the structure be intentionally released and demolished because it is toxic and no longer serves life? Or is this an empty lot cleared by gratitude, ready for the slow miracle of rebuilding?
It brings such clarity to the chaos of human emotions. And Doc C concludes the entire dialogue with a powerful summary of what a healthy relationship actually is. Because we started by dismantling the idea that a healthy relationship is one that never changes. So what is it? He says, healthy relationships are not those that never change. Healthy relationships continue serving life even as they change. Some remain beside us for the daily commute. Some remain behind us in the historic districts. Some remain ahead of us, waiting at the next horizon. But every meaningful relationship becomes part of the architecture that made us who we are.
It completely, utterly dismantles the illusion of permanence we started with. The goal of human connection is not stagnation. The goal is not to curate a museum of people who never challenge you to grow. The goal is a living, breathing architecture, a city that adapts to the people living inside it.
So to you, listening to this deep dive right now, our final call to action is exactly what Doc C prescribes for a healthy, emotional metropolis. Care for your roads. Do the daily, unglamorous work of communication. Ask about the sigh. Fill the potholes before they become sinkholes. Strengthen your bridges. Do the thoughtful repair when it is possible and extend the invitation for forgiveness. Honor your history. Appreciate your legacy districts and the people who built you without trying to move back into the past. And above all, welcome the quiet miracle of renewal.
Because living cities never stop growing.
And I want to leave you with one final thought, something to chew on as you go about the rest of your day that builds on everything we've unpacked. We spend so much time mourning the buildings we've had to tear down. We stress over the demolition. We cry over the friendships that faded and the relationships that couldn't be repaired. But think about the mechanics of urban planning. What if the empty lots we create by releasing those old, condemned structures are exactly where our most important life-changing future relationships are waiting to be built? You cannot build a new skyscraper if the lot is full of rubble. You cleared that space for a reason. So look at the map of your life. What are you going to build in your empty lot?